Alright guys, so we all know that Addiesdive is predominantly known for dive watches, some of them being really good impressive ones, including this one down here. It's a 1000 meter diver, and a couple of other ones I've got here as well. I'll leave a link to the full playlist in the top and also down in the description. But as you've probably seen from the thumbnail, we've got something a bit different here. This is more of a dress watch slash diver, but the question is it too much of a compromise? Should they have focused on one or the other? That's the question we're going to try and answer with this video, and hopefully once we've gone through everything, you'll be able to tell one way or the other. And I'll also be talking about another watch similar to this one, that arguably focuses a bit more one way. So you've seen this packaging before, I'm not going to talk about this, get this out of the way. And here is the actual watch. So, I think it's pretty good looking, but as I say, it's a little bit of an amalgamation of a dive watch and a dress watch. You could probably tell straight away which bits are which, but we'll talk about that in a bit more detail as we get into the review, as well as how it also compares to that watch that I alluded to earlier, because they are fairly similar in some ways, but then they make some interesting changes that are arguably improvements. But before we go into any more detail, first of all, let's go over the dimensions. So we've got a diameter of 38.5, thickness of 12.2, lug width of 20, then the all-important lug to lug is coming in at 46.8. When it comes to the weight on the supply bracelet, with all the links included, it's coming at 133 grams, and then size for my 7-inch wrist, it's coming at 123. So let's take a closer look at the bracelet and talk about that in a bit more detail. We'll start with the clasp. So we've got the Addiesdive logo on there, and then the text. Then we've got a decent amount of micro adjust there, so sizing won't be an issue. Then we've got the double pushers and milled clasp. Then when it comes to the case back, again we've got that Addiesdive logo on there. This is definitely leaning more towards the diver style watch with this, with that deep sea hunter on there, and the fact that we've got 200 meter water resistance and a screw down case back as well. Not normally stuff you'd see on a dress watch. Now moving on to the bracelet. So it's fully brushed links, and then the only polishing we've got is on the side. They're just push pins as well, no screw links, but they work well enough. Then moving on to the head of the watch, that's pretty much carried on, so it's fully brushed, apart from those polished chamfered details on the edge and on the crown guards. And then we've got that signed crown with the Addiesdive logo again, and you can see we've got a nice bit of curvature to that crystal as well. It's almost like a top hat style, but not quite that tall, a bit more subtle. And now we're in closer, you can also see that polished edge running around the edge of the bezel as well. So apart from some little polished details, it is basically a fully brushed watch, which again is something you'd expect more from a dive watch as opposed to a dress watch. But now let's get on to the most interesting aspect of this watch, and that is the dial. So we've got this really nice cream dial. It actually says on the listing it's beige, but I'd definitely call it more of a cream. So we've got those really nice applied indices, which are polished and faceted as well, so they do play with the light nicely. Then we've got that border around the date window at the 3 o'clock as well. Again, matching the finish on the indices with the polishing. And it's the same with the hands as well, apart from that GMT hand, which you might not be able to see on this because it is under that hour hand. I've got it lined up like this so you can see it does sometimes get a little bit masked by it because they are the same length. But now this is where some of the differences come in between this version and the AD2063, because it has a similar dial, but that one actually has 24-hour markers where this has got the small triangles, and because of that it doesn't have the 24-hour bezel on that version. It's more of a standard kind of dress style bezel, just with a high polish. And another change it makes is the branding. So it doesn't have the logo on that one, and with the Addiesdive text it is more dressier style. So if you want something a bit more in keeping with the Grand Seiko this is homaging, that version is probably your better bet. But again, if you're more interested in something that's just taking inspiration from it, then perhaps this is going to be the one for you. That being said though, one thing that they do change on the AD2065 is that they move the date window down to the 6 o'clock. I do personally prefer that, but it doesn't have that frame around it. And if it was sticking to the Grand Seiko, that actually has it at the 3 o'clock as well, and not at the 6. So in that aspect, this is actually more like that one. One big key difference between the two though, is the dial materials. So this one is actually enamel, as far as I can tell from the listing information and the pictures. The other version, the AD2065, that isn't enamel. So you're probably wondering now, with this being a fairly cheap watch, is it going to have sapphire crystal on it or not? Let's check that out now and find out, using the trusty diamond selector tool. And yep, we have got sapphire crystal, which is good to see at this price. And again, according to the listing information for the AD2065, this is another difference as well. According to that, that's only got a mineral crystal. So we don't actually have any lume on this one, so I'm not going to be doing a lume test with this. Surprisingly enough though, the AD2065 does actually have some lume according to the listing, and from what I can see from the pictures, that appears to be true. I find this to be a little bit of an odd choice, given this is more of like the dive style watch. You would have thought this one would have had the lume, and the other one, which is more of a traditional kind of dress watch, wouldn't. So, strange they've done it that way around. So you've probably figured out by now, we've got a quartz movement in this, but the question is, what movement is it? So it's actually a Swiss Ronda 515-24H. So I'll quickly show you in action now. So we've got a screw down crown here. Nice and grippy, easy to use and access despite having the crown guards there. Pop it out to the first position. And then if we turn it one way, we can move that GMT hand, which you can see more clearly now, with that blue colour. Metallic blue, not actually blued. Turn it the other way, we can change the date. Then if we pull it out to the second position, you can see the second hand stops, so we got hacking. And then we can just change the time. And obviously that GMT hand will move with that as well. Then pop it back in, second hand re-engages, all works well, no issues whatsoever, as you'd expect with a Swiss movement, despite it being a fairly cheap quartz one. And then we can just screw the crown back down, again, no issues, despite having the crown guards there, because it is nice and grippy. So, hopefully by now we've gone through a lot of this, you're getting more of an answer to that question we asked at the start. Is this more of a compromise watch because they've kind of done half dive watch, half dress watch? Or do you think it works? Whilst you're thinking about that, I'll show you what it's like on wrist, go over the pros and cons, and let you know my opinion on whether I think you should buy this or not. So here it is on my 7-inch wrist. And I do actually think it looks pretty good. It's definitely something a little bit different. And when it comes to sizing, that's not an issue at all. You've got plenty of micro adjust there to get the perfect fit. Yeah, it's a little bit of an odd combination, but somehow I do think it kind of works. Obviously you're not going to be going diving with this realistically because there's no lume on it. And we also don't have a dive style bezel either, but realistically who really uses dive watches for diving? As I said earlier, I've got that 1000 meter Addiesdive diver there. I've never gone diving in my life. I'm probably never going to. So for me at least, I think it comes down to basically which one you prefer the look of. Do you prefer having the 24-hour markers on the bezel, or do you prefer them being on the dial, more like the Grand Seiko it's Homage in? And more like that AD2065 that I've mentioned and talked about in this review also. This one has got a slightly thicker case, with it being a 200 meter resistant, quote, dive watch. I wouldn't say it's overly thick, but for a dressier kind of style watch, I guess it is a bit. But again, I'm thinking of this more as a dressier style dive type watch. But if that isn't for you and you want a more traditional dress watch, I'd definitely go for the AD2065. But do remember that one doesn't have the enamel dial and it doesn't have the sapphire either. So if those two things are deal breakers for you, you're probably going to have to go for this one if you do like this dial style. And another interesting point, despite this having the sapphire and the enamel dial, this is actually cheaper than the other version. I think it's by about £10, and I still can't quite figure out why. Because they both got the same movement, they've got the same bracelet as far as I can tell. The only differences, really, are this has got an enamel dial and sapphire crystal, which I'd say are better things than the other one. So why is that one more expensive? The only other big difference between the two is that that one is slightly smaller, but again, that should mean it's slightly cheaper because it's less materials used. But whichever one you're interested in, I'll leave links down in the description to both of them, so you can check them both out, and see if the prices have changed since I recorded this video, because perhaps that might sway you one way or the other. But that's it for this one guys, thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.